This is the Investor Connect podcast series, episode number 28. In this episode, Hall Martin interviews Jay Zeidman of the RESOLUTE Venture Partners. They're going to be talking about funding healthcare startups. In this episode, Hall Martin of the TenCapital.Group is the principal of Investor Connect, who is interviewing Jay Zeidman. After a brief discussion where they describe that particular firm, they are more into the digital health space. They talk about the proof of concept and how that's important to grow the firm of the investment and how their experience when the sales process is growing revenue. They focus on firms that invest in hospital systems to make the hospitals run better, run faster, and run cheaper. And their focus also is on 4 items: the proactive care of patients, the workforce automation tools for the staff, as well as procurement of goods and services, and better outpatient management. And in this discussion, there are examples given of progressive hospitals initializing technology, and then Hall and Jay then have a discussion on other mature technologies in which to invest. Now, they're really in the maturing phases of the digital health space, and you'll see the discussion initiated by Hall on telehealth, artificial intelligence, and value-based healthcare management. So, in this interview about the digital health space with Jay Zeidman, let's listen in.
Hello, this is the Investor Connect podcast. Today we have with us Jay Zeidman of RESOLUTE Venture Partners, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Jay. And you're with RESOLUTE Venture Partners. Can you tell us more about your VC firm and what you guys do there?
Absolutely, Hal. Thanks for having me today. Excited to be here. RESOLUTE is a Houston-based firm, investment fund, focused on healthcare technology, really digital health, health IT, tech-enabled services. I know what we don't do. We're not pharma, med device, biotech. We really like to look at tools and technologies that primarily market into the hospital systems and the managed care plans that are relatively easy to integrate and scale and use. Don't have to go through complex regulatory FDA approval processes or clinical trials, but we're proudly based in Texas. I'm backed by an experienced group in Nashville called Clayton Associates, which was founded by the late Clayton McWhorter, who was the former CEO of HCA. But RESOLUTE consists of a lot of Texas investors who hopefully decided to put their money in something besides oil and gas and real estate and go out and target companies across the country. But proudly here in Houston, home to the largest medical center in the world, and we think a great place to find companies or help companies really commercialize their technologies here.
So what do you look for in investing? What do you like to see most in the kind of deal flow that you see for your fund?
Proof of concept. So RESOLUTE is a seed to Series A fund. So we're not angel investors. We typically want to be in a company. We've made 2 investments to date that have some strategic co-investors alongside of it, not just a pass the hat with friends and family. I mean, we really view ourselves as bringing not just an equity check, but a Rolodex to help you grow as a portfolio company. What we're looking for is proof of concept. We want to see that you have a demonstrated product, that you've had some sort of beta or pilot program, you've navigated through certain hospital bureaucracies. I mean, I love it when people tell me they're talking to this system or talking to that system. Those conversations can go on for a long time. So, with a demonstrated proof of concept, that means that you've sort of gone through the sales process before, executed a contract, and started hopefully generating some revenue. That's sort of first off the bat what we like to look for. We're not interested in giving someone some money to kind of see if their product works. We want to give you money to go and grow. Use it to go hire sales reps, business development team, and go out and really market your product.
So you focus on the B2B side of the medical space or healthcare space. Can you give more detail about what you look for in that aspect?
Yeah, so I mean, we're most interested in companies that market into hospital systems, whether that's, small 10-bed systems up to 300, 400, 500-bed systems across the country, and managed care plans. I mean, we think that, given, at least on the hospital side, given a lot of the budget overruns that most of these institutions have faced, and the uncertainty in the regulatory climate out of Washington with, the continued discussion and proposal for the repeal of the ACA, hospitals are looking to pinch pennies everywhere they can. And so we are interested in, really companies that not just can navigate through that sales process, but that integrate or serve as an ancillary to, an Epic or a Cerner, right? We're not looking for something to be, a replacement to that, given their dominance of the market. But how do you make hospitals run better, cheaper, and faster? How do you make doctors communicate with their patients better, cheaper, and faster? How do you help patients communicate across different points of care in terms of going from a doctor in one institution, say their cardiologist is at hospital X and their pulmonologist at hospital Y, how are they communicating with each other? Those are things that we're very interested in. And then on the insurance side, we're really looking at proactive care management. I think a lot of insurance companies are, given reimbursement rates continue to get cut, are trying to hold people more accountable for what's being billed out. And so, our concept is, spend a few dollars today to save a few dollars to save more tomorrow. Seems to be a growing trend if, again, you can navigate through the contracting process. So that's, in brief, what excites us.
So controlling costs and cutting costs is a big driver in the industry these days. If you had to pick one or two or three places where there's the most opportunity to do that, where would you recommend somebody look to cut the costs in the system?
Labor would be one. Not just what they're paying doctors, but really what you're paying staff. We've invested in as an example, not to be biased, but we invested in a workforce optimization tool called Shift Wizard that's helping better manage the nursing staff, right? You have a lot of nurses working more hours than they're typically allotted or budgeted, and a lot of that's typically not caught until it's time for payroll. And so, we think a lot of institutions can do a better job, better optimizing their workforces. How many people do you really need around a bed at a given time? And how are you using predictive analytics to better forecast those needs? So I think labor is certainly one place to start. It takes a lot of people to run major hospital systems, but we know that they also can be very bureaucratic, as evidenced by anybody who's ever tried to sell anything into a system or has ever worked in a system with the multiple layers of individuals there. So I think from an administrative perspective, there's just a lot of opportunity to reduce those labor costs. Two, I would say really in procurement of goods and services. We've seen a lot of these group purchasing organizations sort of switch to digital formats. The UPO model is a smart model, right? Aggregate and sell in bulk. But giving smaller institutions, smaller hospitals, the same opportunity to purchase goods and services, we think, through a digital format is another great way for people to tap into, efforts to reduce costs. So I think that's a couple of ideas. The other thing I guess we're looking for is better outpatient management, right? Reduce readmission rates, which typically lead to extended length of stay. So, how are you better managing more of the chronically sick patients who are discharged, and the way they're managing their care in an outpatient setting, communicating with their care providers, with their family members to make sure that these folks are, adhering to the therapy, adhering to their medication. Anything you can do to sort of, on a digital side, again, to reduce that readmission rate, we think is a win and obviously a major cost saver if you can reduce that.
So I recently applied for healthcare, and I felt like I was calling into a 1970s call center where everything was on the phone, very little was done on the web, and I was really shocked at how far behind the technology was. But that may have been an anomaly, but in general, where do you think the healthcare IT systems are on the curve? Are they up to date? Are they a little bit behind, or are they way behind?
I think in general, behind. A lot of systems have switched to Epic, obviously, and Cerner, and I guess with those being the dominant players. I don't think anyone's really fully tapped into the full functionality of those systems. I mean, I still see a lot of doctors' offices that use manila folders and fax machines, and patients don't own their data, so you wind up, having to have your information faxed or, carry these folders across to different care providers, as you're sort of seeing different specialists. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of digitizing the true, EHR process, how that data, who owns that data, and how it's communicated. I think that's we're still operating in the 20th century. I think some of the smaller institutions, these micro hospitals, urgent care clinics are starting to better utilize technology. And as a result, you've seen a lot more acquisitions or roll-ups in that space. But in the larger institutions, I think we have a long way to go.
Right. Well, I'm just always surprised at how far behind hospitals seem to be in the era of technology with mobile devices, the tablets and the data analytics and those type of things. I guess some groups have really caught up to it. Are there any examples of hospitals you think are really with it?
Yeah, I see it here in Houston. Houston's proudly home of the largest medical center in the world. I think, I've seen MD Anderson has brought on an innovation team. Memorial Hermann, we had a presentation the other day from a physician who's been using, they've acquired 30 or 40 of these telemedicine units to help, the doctors down here in the medical center can communicate with patients down in Cypress and Spring and Katy and remote parts of the city without having to get in their car and drive an hour out in traffic to, they can see more patients in a day, but also still get that quality FaceTime with their patients. So, I know Texas Children's, they have a whole innovation team now that's looking at, using this technology, deploying some of it. I think we're at the cusp of it. I think if you look at other more successful systems like, out in California and San Diego, right, and Denver, there's other hospitals, other sort of cities that are, I think, better at it than we are here. But I think Houston's probably a few years away from starting to catch up to these players. And once we do, I believe we'll be a force to be reckoned with. What better place to scale your business than down here on Fannin Street, where you have more hospital beds and patient visits than anywhere else in the world?
All right. Well, you're coming from it from a financial venture capital point of view. One of the areas I see coming up strong is the corporate venture capital. Pharma started this many years ago, but it appears most other companies are getting into it now where they're making direct investments into startups and early-stage companies for various reasons. What do you see there?
I think it's great. I think the more people, investing in early stage businesses, the better. Look, what I see mostly here in Texas is still a big apprehension for venture, even though oil and gas was the original venture capitalist. I think that people are still coming around to the term of what it means to really, put a little bit of seed money into a company. But I think corporate VC is coming more than norm. And, from the reports I read, that's great. I don't think it's as strong in Houston or in Texas as you see, out in the coastal parts of the country, east and west. But, again, given the fact that we're home to an industry, the oil and gas industry, which is the dominant industry here in Texas, hopefully they're not the last industry to catch on, the last corporations to catch on. Obviously we know Chevron, Exxon, they all have these tech venture, wings, and they've been doing this for a while. So, we'll see if they expanded and if other sort of the smaller corporations start to really catch on.
Right, that's an interesting angle. The oil and gas is really a venture model specific to a certain commodity, and eventually that model could be applied to other things, medical device, predictive analytics, telehealth, all of those others could be not too far behind. Once you get some success going and people get confidence and learn how to do it, then it can take off in a bigger way. It's not as prevalent here as it is in other parts of the country, but it appears to be coming as more and more of these industries mature. As you look at the technologies out there, like the patient management and the reimbursement optimization and the telehealth, what do you consider to be one of the more mature technologies that people could invest in?
That's a good question. Mature in terms of just from that sub-industry perspective, or, when you're investing in like a, pharmaceutical company or medical device, they have to go through a long process. So I think you need to be patient as an investor. We see a lot in the population health or sort of care management space. I think that that's becoming a mature industry, but most of what I see is pretty early, right? So, seeing where the industry is going gives me, I guess, some hope that we can find the right deals that, where there is an acquisition target or an exit opportunity or a roll-up, opportunity. That's really what we're most interested in. So I'm probably not really answering your question, but I I think a majority of the digital health space is still maturing. I think there's a pretty set formula for how med devices and pharmaceutical companies are developing in R&D and take their products to market. But I think digital health is still getting its footing.
Right. I see a lot of early stage companies where there is less of a business and more of a science experiment, and that's the heartburn I find a lot of investors have, is that we really don't know if we have a business on the other side of this. But when I look at healthcare, there seem to be certain sectors where the business model is becoming very clear. Patient management, reducing cost and improving sign-ups and so forth appears to be, solid footing. I hear a lot about telehealth, but to be candid, I really don't see a lot of it going on out there in day-to-day, but maybe I'm just not in that part of the world. What do you think about telehealth and telemedicine?
Yeah.
Where is that on the curve?
So, I think you kind of have to, within that sector, sort of break it up into a few things, right? There's the way, I guess, the telemedicine piece of, okay, I buy a device, I get a reading on it, I use it, upload it to my phone, and it alerts, my care providers kind of who I am, what's going on, et cetera. And then I think there's the way doctors can literally interact with their patients without having to have an actual office visit. I mean, at the end of the day, my issue with telehealth is this. I mean, how much data can you really get from a device in the home? I think we still haven't seen, besides some general statistics, right? Is that going to really give the doctor, the person making the decision whether you need to be admitted to the hospital or not, the right data? I still think that's a little immature. Now, in terms of doctors utilizing sort of these, Skype-type systems and being able to pull up your patient data quickly, I think that's a great idea. We've seen a lot of companies doing that. The third piece of this is the sort of artificial intelligence, right? The digital nurse that interacts with you. And again, I still think that's a pretty immature space. I mean, how much can I as a patient articulate to a nurse how I feel, and a digital nurse, and how can this nurse spit back really clinical data on what's wrong with me? I mean, they can't diagnose you really, right? I mean, I think the most they can say is, yeah, I need to go take some Tylenol, or you need to go call your doctor and go in for a visit. So I want to see how that plays out, but, there's certainly a lot of companies that have started to figure this out. There's been a few here out of Houston that have gotten some good funding, and are continuing to do some more development. Obviously, what Silicon Valley is seeing is, probably light years ahead of what we're seeing down here, but hopefully we can catch up. And then the other question on telehealth is billing. I think the insurance companies are still trying to figure out how to properly bill and reimburse, or get billed and reimbursed properly for these visits. And at the end of the day, does this all help, the end game, which is reduce these readmission rates or hospital ER visits, for issues that can really be handled through telemedicine?
Yeah, we had a conference last year, and we had our local medical school come out and talk about value-based healthcare, and that appears to be the next generation, where doctors will be paid based on outcomes as opposed to just running tests. And one of the issues that came up in the discussion is you have to know how the patient did at the end of that process. In other words, you have to assess and stay in touch and follow up in order to be reimbursed. What do you see out there in that area?
So now you're sort of talking about outcomes management, in my opinion. I mean, value-based care is really going to depend. It forces doctors to be more efficient in their use of services that they're providing, and what the outcomes of the patients are and how those outcomes are managed. That's, like I said kind of earlier, what really intrigues me. People who are, go to the hospital for, and I'm talking more like chronically sick patients, right? I mean, someone who's generally healthy goes in for a site visit, gets a, prescription, goes home, gets better. I mean, that's, I think the more we can do to sort of reduce the unnecessary tests that are done just so doctors can bill for, 10 tests, value-based care, I think, really forces doctors to be more efficient on that. So that's good. The other piece is really dealing with the more chronically sick patients. And, I see a lot of great deals that are helping patients better manage their care in the home setting. I think it's a combination of good labor and technology. I think when you see a happy marriage there, I mean, I don't think you can completely take out the human element, but if you can help, chronically sick, elderly patients who are discharged to go home, and better manage, like I said earlier, their therapy, adhere to their medication, anything you can do to sort of reduce that readmission rate, I think, is a win. And so we see a lot of great deals out there. It's just sort of, you got to pick the right ones and see at what stage they are. I think the biggest point is hopefully more and more systems are opening up to launching these beta programs to try to reduce, to fight this conservative culture that I think has plagued generally the healthcare industry that's, fought resistance. I mean, we all know that if you try to fight technology, you will lose. And I think that thought process has really integrated itself into the healthcare community now. And as, an older generation of doctors, sort of phases out, I think you're getting a lot of newer folks who, are embracing technology a lot more and willing to leverage it and try it out to see if that can help their operations efficiencies, at the end of the day, outcomes.
Well, that's great. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. I appreciate it. Did you have any further thoughts you want to share with us about what you invest in and where the healthcare investing world is going?
No, I mean, I'm a big proponent of entrepreneurship. I think Texas needs more venture capital activity. We need more investing in that space. We need more human capital. We need people to move here to take over and run businesses. Finding CEOs, COOs to come and launch startups in Texas has been weak. So hopefully, as a small venture fund, I can help contribute to that and get investors used to putting money to work in this space. I think we have a long way to go in the state, but I do believe in about 5 years we'll get there. It's great to see the tech scene emerge in Austin. Hopefully Houston and Dallas, San Antonio aren't too far behind. And I think if we all work together and collaborate more, there can be a real opportunity. From my perspective, Resolute's always out looking for deals. We've got capital to deploy. We typically put $1 million, $500,000 up to $2 million per deal. We want to take an active role in helping you grow, not just, we're not interested in managing the business. We want to take an active board seat and be good partners. I mean, that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. It's just being a good investment partner with your portfolio companies, their management, communicate, and go from there.
Well, great. Well, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate your taking time and wish you success in those fundings. We'll go ahead and close it out, and thank you for your time.
Great. We'll hope to see you often at the conference.
Very good.